Evening, my friends. This is Pastor Lou Kilgore coming to you from the High Mountain Presbyterian Church in Franklin Lakes. We are here almost every Tuesday evening. Tonight I'm ahead of my class. By that I mean I'm the first one here. We do have a Zoom version of this going at the same time that we have live stream for those of you who are tuning in either live or watching at a different time during the week. I'm always fascinated to wonder who are the people who join us through the live stream. I do know the people who join me on the Zoom, even though so far tonight, a beautiful day, and maybe resulted in people not wanting to come in and sit in front of their computer screens. But we are beginning a new chapter, a new book. We are out of the doldrums of some of what we had been wading through. We talked about the theology of Job, and we made it through the books of Ezekiel and the reconstruction of the temple. And we are now in the Psalms. Many of them loved, both in the Jewish and in the Christian tradition, because they carry deep sense of the relationship God of relationships, and God who cares about and walks with. It's also, the Psalms are very expressive of human emotions. More obvious here is what I have said in the past, and that is you open the Bible to learn about God, but more so you will learn about what human beings are like. So here comes Barbara. Hello, Barbara.
Somehow or other, it takes more steps every time.
Well, I try to make it easy by not having passwords or anything like that, but
but then they ask you, join this, join that, join whatever.
Well, you're the first one, so even though it was a long journey in, you're still first. So.
Okay, Tuesday night.
I was just talking to the live stream audience and saying maybe it would just be us tonight, but I'm glad you're here.
I think Debbie will be coming because Ramadan starts tomorrow, but tomorrow it's sundown. So okay. I think she's planning on coming tonight.
Okay, and it was such a beautiful day. I imagined that not everybody wanted to come in and sit in front of their computer screen.
Right. I saw it was 59. Oh. It was 50 here this morning when I got up. So everyone is thinking, ski jackets, hats, mittens.
I know. It makes you into a bunch of wilting flowers down there. You can't handle any cold.
But then by noon, it's 80 degrees.
Yeah, it was cold. There was frost on the yard this morning, but very quickly got warmed up, and this afternoon it was just gorgeous. It was really, really nice. So
great.
I was out walking with the dog and enjoying the day.
Okay.
So I think the others will be along. I was just telling the online group that we are beginning now a new book in reading the Psalms, and I'm excited about that. We might find still some disturbing theology, but a lot of it is more obviously the reflections of what human beings think and feel, rather than it is trying to paste those ideas onto God. And I'm more comfortable with that, honestly, all along the way. So I guess we'll just wait a while for them to arrive.
Okay. Here comes Melinda.
Oh, you saw her before I did. Oh, I know why. I've got a different view on the camera. She can't talk yet, but she's there. Oops.
I was talking, you just couldn't hear me because I was on mute.
You're talking to yourself?
I guess so.
Hello?
I was saying hi. I'm in my quiet place, the car.
Yeah.
How are you feeling, Lou?
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm good. How about you? How are you?
You feeling good? You weren't feeling well last week, so.
Yeah, I mean, when I say I'm not feeling well, some people think that, I'm really sick. But the truth is,
No, not necessarily.
No.
You said you had a headache or something.
I'd had a long day and no sleep at all the night before, and I don't even know why. But when I got the thought of having to get over here and talk, I just thought, I can't do it. So I just hung it up.
Oh, to be human. Oh my goodness.
Yes. Don't worry. I'm all of that. I am definitely human. I can wear my humanness all week long.
At least you listen to your limitations. That's wonderful.
Yes. Well, I've learned that if I don't, I pay a price. So I felt bad. I tried to reach everybody and tell everybody. I forgot to email Judy directly. So she had gotten the message that there was a meeting, and then for about the next half hour, she was hunting around trying to find us. And the next morning, she called to ask if everything was okay here at the church. So I think it left her with a feeling of doom or something. But anyway, maybe she'll join us tonight. I don't know. So.
Don't fall asleep on us.
Oh, I won't. I'm wide awake. I actually took a nap earlier today. But.
I'm going to go off camera because.
Okay.
I'm going to go off camera. I'm going to go off camera and I'll mute when we start so that I don't distract with the driving.
Okay. That's fine.
Hello?
Hello?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm going to be, the evening prayer times are too close together. I'm going to do the Maghrib prayer and then I'll be right on. It's only about 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Okay, thank you. Lou, did you hear that?
I did. Yes, I did. Yep.
She'll be on in 5.
Okay.
And I heard from Alice today, so she should be coming on.
Okay.
Good.
And I think Brenda Calloway may be joining for us.
Good.
And I forward the invitation to Cheryl, so she may be joining as well.
Right?
Yeah.
The more the merrier.
Melinda.
Especially if
I
you're doing
agree.
Psalms. Good book, right?
Melinda, we tried to send a thank you note to Alice Taylor to acknowledge the gift from the women's group, but the address we have, it got returned to us.
You send it to the church?
No, we sent.
Yes.
Oh, was it sent to the church?
Yes, yes.
Well, it came back. It came back. It was returned to sender. So I don't know. I don't know why, but we're still.
I don't either. The church is still there.
Yeah, we're still.
Unless, did you send another one? I sent a note directly.
We sent another one, and I think the other one we tried. We had an address for a house or a home, and.
No, I sent one to the church with her name on it.
All right. Well, maybe she got that one then. And anyway, we wanted to know how grateful.
We haven't heard. We say you're very welcome. We like, if we can spread our ministry, through someone else, our arms just reach further. And we like what High Mountain is doing, and we're happy to be a part of it.
That's wonderful. Well, the thank you I sent was for the Christmas in Uganda
Yeah, right. That was
donation.
Right. And it's always encouraging, when church to church, we do those things. It's very encouraging because it makes you feel like you're not swimming alone in the water. And so it was very nice.
Right, and I we learned about it by, us being a part of the Bible study and also worshiping with you sometimes on Sundays. So and getting the newsletter, so we can join missions, and we don't have to invent something, create something. We can just be a part of something.
Yes,
We love connecting the dots.
Yeah,
That's what that is.
I love that. I love that. So
Lou,
Alice and I are campaigning at Claremont.
Yeah.
Lou, I have a
Wherever we
question.
can help someone.
Yes.
Before we get started on Psalms, I've been doing art history programs down here. The university has short programs. And they were talking today about Jodo, but they mentioned, now I gotta find it, a book, The Golden Legend. The Golden Legend. And they said that was the first printed book, and it was religious stories, but not in the Bible. And they were talking about a lot of the frescoes were from scenes of things that happened, like Mary's mother Elizabeth and other stories that were not in the Bible, but were stories that were in this book called The Golden Legend. And this would have been around the 13th century. Is that anything that you are familiar with?
No, I'm not. I mean, I'm listening to hear connections to other. There was a collection of stories that I have, but I don't think they were. What did you say? It was the Golden what?
Legend, Legend.
No, I'm going to have to go look that one up.
Yeah, I was curious. I'd never heard of it before, but they were talking about different depictions in the story of Mary. Mostly, I think that they were showing, and they how these frescoes were done in the 12th, 13th, 14th century, before the Renaissance time. And he said that this was the first printed book. And I had never heard of it before.
I'd never heard of it either. It's very interesting. And you say it was around the 13th century?
Yeah, I'm looking it up now. It says The Golden Legend, Readings on the Saints, book by Jacobus de Varenne, depicting the lives of the saints in an array of factual and fictional stories.
Huh.
Says, yeah.
No. I never have heard of it, but I'm interested to know.
It was written by Archbishop of Genoa, one of the most popular religious works of the Middle Ages.
Wow.
Yeah, he lived from 1230 to 1298.
I've not heard of it, but I'll look it up. Hello, Colette.
Hi.
How are you tonight?
Everything's on Google.
Yeah, that's right.
That's where I'm looking at the Wikipedia thing right now. Lives of the Greater Saints of the Medieval Church, that was one of the most popular religious works of the Middle Ages. It's a compiler, it says, rather than the author. So they were legendary lives of the Greater Saints. Because, so many times, Lou, you mentioned that a lot of what we consider tradition, the stories are not really in the Bible, but they were part of the tradition of the church over the years.
Yeah, and sometimes it's very hard when you want people to read and interpret the Bible. Those stories have a way of sneaking in, and they insert themselves. Like one of the stories that is hardest to sort of stand against is the contemporary story during the Middle Ages of the origin of Satan. That Satan was a disobedient angel who fell from heaven, and and people they have a sense of that story and they think it comes from the Bible, but it does not. It's it's extra biblical and was popular. It was a popular way of thinking about who the devil is, and one disobedient angel that fell, Lucifer, the whole name of Lucifer is not in,
Right.
Lucifer, the name is not in the Bible. That it's not there. But it
I
was.
learned that in Sunday school.
You what?
I learned that in Sunday school.
I know, they taught it as if it was part of the Bible, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not. It's not in the Bible. It is, like this book, evidently, that Barbara's talking about, it was in the collection of popular stories that people used to help tell the stories, quote, of the Bible, but they're extra biblical. And I think in some ways that's why I always complain that the non-biblical version of Adam and Eve is more popular than the biblical version. It's like it's been used so many times and so loosely that people know the story version of it, but not the biblical story. And that, when you do the kind of work I do, it's a little frustrating, but it gives me something to do, to battle against those ideas anyway.
He also mentioned that at the nativity scene that the oxen and the donkey were never mentioned,
Right.
but that every artist shows an oxen and a donkey in the nativity. It was very interesting presentation.
Yeah, that's another place that famously the stories are larger than the Bible. The stories about the scene. I still think a lot of people think there was a little drummer boy that was at the manger as well. And who knows, maybe there was, I don't know. But, in our contemporary awareness of the birth of Jesus, there definitely was. And the hymn writers had a lot to do with that. The idea of three kings, the story of the three kings. The story writers, extra biblical story writers, imagined there were three kings because there were three gifts. And then the story grew. But the whole idea of how we imagine our nativity scenes tell the story of the stories more than they do the story of the gospel writers in Matthew and Luke anyway. Cheryl, I see you're there. Are you online?
Yes, sir.
Oh, good. So nice to hear you.
Hey.
Can't see you, but there you are.
I'm having some problems with my camera, so
Okay.
It looks like we're at a discotheque.
Okay. That's it. I see it. That's right. I like that. I like that. I like
You're
that.
dating yourself.
Yeah, that's right. All right. Well, I think Judy will be along to join us, and I don't know, there may be a couple others that will join in. But why don't we start? We are beginning anew the book of Psalms, and I'm excited about our journey into the Psalms. I did the first 50 Psalms as a part of my online during the worst first days of COVID. I did a psalm every day, and I was in front of the camera and I read it, and I sort of did what we do to get together today, but it was just me. I didn't have the input of anybody else. And I found it to be very helpful. Of course, big surprise, the Psalms have been one of the most popular parts of the Bible to read because they become somehow more immediately connected to our lives. And I just wanted to say a couple things, comments from a commentator in terms of introducing the Psalms, a couple of things that set, I think, the parameters of what are the Psalms. First of all, I want to say this because I think this is very important. In a casual kind of way, Christian church especially has accepted at the beginning of the Psalms there's an attribution. It'll say a Psalm of David or a Psalm, a lot of them are Psalms of David. And so in a loose kind of way, you'll hear people say that the Psalms were written by David. I want to say to you, not just to be, I'm not trying to be disagreeable, but I want you to know, I want you to know that the Hebrew authors never considered that that's what that meant. And I wanted to read to you, all of the Psalms begin with a vowel symbol, and it's part of the context is assumed that it means this is a Psalm of David. And you'll see that in the translation, they say a Psalm of David. But I want to give you just as one example, sorry, that the titles, this is from the commentator Peter Craigie, that I really like his commentary. The first part of the problems concerns whether or not this designation of persons in the titles was ever intended to convey authorship, or whether there was some other purpose in the designation. And I want to read to you what some of those other possibilities. The following are possible meanings of the preposition, the vowel, the consonant that is put in the front. It can mean, for example, for David, a psalm for David. And a lot of the psalms that the English translation, the King James, says a psalm of David, leaves open the possibility that we're to think that David actually wrote these psalms. Almost all of the dating of the Psalms puts them much later than David. There are a few coronation hymns and psalms that may actually have been written during the time of David and may have been recited during the coronation of kings, which was a real big function of the songs and the psalms. But listen to the variety of options. These prepositions in the front can mean for David, by David, to David, dedicated to David, with reference to and concerning about David, or for the use of David. You see, what I'm saying is that little preposition in the front, which is undefined, in the King James Version especially, they just went, oh, this is a psalm of David, this is a psalm of David, meaning this is a psalm that David wrote. Later scholarship really kind of just removes that. It's not even, like some of them are so clearly dated as times much later than David, but that the author says this is a psalm dedicated to David. This is a psalm for the use of David or David's kingdom. And so what I want to say is, so often it's important and informs the way you understand what's being written to know who wrote it. And the scholars today will pretty much tell you it is almost impossible to, even from the text itself, to determine who wrote any of these psalms. The authors of these psalms are anonymous. And even though they do have these ascriptions that say a psalm of David, as what I've just told you is, the context possibility is so wide that you can see that the book itself is not, the psalm itself is not claiming to be written by David. There are some context clues that tell you what might have been going on at the time, and the author sometimes positions themselves and imagines themselves back in the time of some of the battles that David and the Israelites fought, and wonders about what it was like, what it meant to trust in God in times of battle. But most of that is understood. As the writer of the psalm, you are to understand that that's what's happening. This is not considered to be from the pen of David to us. So I thought that was important. Let's see. There was something else I wanted to offer as a... So here's another thing that I think will come up in our reading of the Psalms. You know, in so much of the Bible that we have been studying, the prophets will say, "Thus saith the Lord." And the writings of the prophets or the writings of the text are purported to be what God is saying to the people. And it becomes particularly troubling for us, and we've stumbled over this before, when some of the things that God has purported to say don't really sound like a God of love. They don't sound like a God of compassion and mercy, but yet they're still attributed to God. In the Psalms, there's a different tone. And I want to read in the Psalms, literature purports to be primarily human creation. In other words, in the Psalms, it's right up front that the words of the Psalms are the writings of humans, about human experience. And I think we'll find, he goes on to say, though it is created in the religious context and pertains to the relationship between Israel and God, or in some cases, the relationship between Hebrew and Hebrew, the Psalms fall into the second category with the exception of a few Psalms which have a prophetic character. The book of Psalms as a whole contains Israel's songs and prayers which constitute the response of people to their revelations from God. And you're going to find there are some, I'm sure you've heard some of the really rough psalms, like where the one psalmist wants to dash the heads of the Babylonian babies, against the rocks. But one thing that makes reading the Psalms easier than some of what we've come through is there's no question that the psalm that is writing and expressing that feeling is the feelings of a person. It's the emoting of a person who is saying, this is what it feels like. I am in this frame, but they are not saying that God told them to dash the heads of Babylonian babies against the rocks. And I think that's one of the reasons why the Psalms, by and large, are so much more identifiable as to human beings. Because as we read through these Psalms, you'll hear the psalmist expressing what it feels like to be a human being on the journey of faith, of what the challenges are, how to trust in God, and what it feels like to try to trust in God when things don't look good. And the psalmists, the writers, are free to express that, and human beings then fondly will often memorize the Psalms for that very reason. It helps to give expression to human beings and to their thoughts about God. Any comments or questions about what I've said? Do you understand what I'm talking about? It's quiet. Wow.
I guess we all agree.
Okay, if that's what silence means, that's really good. Good. I mean, I'm relieved. That's how I feel about it anyway. It's a relief to head into the Psalms because, although, like I said, there are some very coarse and rough emotions and human reactions expressed in here, but no one is trying to attribute those emotions to God. No one is trying to say that God now is going to strike vengeance against people that are perceived as God's enemies. It's just that's not how it's understood in here. All right, are we ready to begin?
Sure.
Okay. I need somebody to read. We'll start at the beginning.
I'll read.
Okay.
Happy are those who do not follow the advice of the wicked, or take the path that sinners tread, or sit in the seat of scoffers, but their delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law they meditate day and night. They are like trees planted by streams of water, which yield their fruit in its season, and their leaves do not wither. In all that they do, they prosper. The wicked are not so, but are like chaff that the wind drives away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. For the Lord watches over the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked will perish.
I like the way of the wicked, but not the wicked will perish.
Exactly. And that, again, I'm so glad you pick up on that because that is a distinctive of the way the writers of the Psalms write. They separate the actions from the persons. And in Psalm 1, this is an appeal for people to they talk about meditating on the law, but this kind of meditation is a meditation that is an invitation to live it out. And by the law, again, I feel like I always have to, I wish sometimes I didn't have to keep reminding us of this, but the law of God finds its root in the call of Abram and Sarah. The law of God is to live your life as recipients, if you are so fortunate, of God's blessing, but to see that the law of God is also another way of talking about the purpose of life. The very purpose of our living is to live out the law of God, which directs us to receiving the blessings of God and receiving the blessings of life and air and water and maybe family and maybe prosperity and all of the blessings that might come in life, health, and to live those things out in blessing and in generosity to others, to be a blessing to the families of the earth. To see to it that we live in such a way is not for living for yourself. That's what the first psalm, he's saying, that's what wickedness is. The definition of wickedness is to think that life offers something that you can grab for yourself. And then that is a defiance of, I wish I had a different word. It's a defiance of the law of God, of the way of God. And walking in the way of God is gained. And I love this. It's because life itself will drive you away from this principle. It will drive you away. It will make you think that you'll be better off to live for yourself, to be selfish, to try to go out and get what you can get for yourself whenever you can get it. But this psalm says, living your life that way will make you like a piece of chaff in the wind. You will be blown about and buffeted all over the face of the earth. But if you meditate, I always feel like that's what we're doing here in Bible study. We are meditating on the law of God. We are trying to remind ourselves and live into ourselves and absorb it for ourselves to say, look, human, you know this is the truth. You know that what you have is the result of the generosity of God, of the blessing of God in your life. So then, by meditating on that, and I think this is part of what we do when we come to church as Christians, or what even, I'm sure, Debbie, that's the purpose of the gathering in the temple,
Masjid, mosque.
Yeah, in the mosque. Is to come and meditate again on a better understanding of who we are in this life and who is God in this life. So that we can then go out and live our lives as people who are immersed in the law of God, which ultimately is a law of grace and compassion and of justice. Justice is a very big part of the expression of living your life according to the law of God.
Mm-hmm. And the comments I have include that the root part is vertical and the chaff is horizontal. Now, I'm assuming that it means that the root is more permanent, whereas the horizontal, the chaff just can be blown away, as is mentioned. Is that what they mean by the difference between vertical and horizontal?
I think so. I think it's, I've always loved that image of the tree planted by the water. I grew up in the hills and valleys of southeastern Pennsylvania, and my ancestors settled there, they said, because they reminded them of the hills of Scotland. But down in the bottom of these valleys, there are always these streams. And the streams run and the trees, the farmland was cleared all except for along the streams. But along the streams there are these trees, and when the raging waters come, the dirt is washed away mostly from around, and you can see the whole of the formation of the tree root system. But the trees are not moved because the roots go down. And I hear that what the commentators are saying, that the chaff, it's funny because on the farm we had both of these things. We had the roots of the trees surviving along the river, and then when we harvested the wheat, the chaff is that shell on the outside of the grain that is just nothing. It's just fluff. Mm-hmm. And even advanced machinery that harvests the wheat and the rye and the barley and the oats, it uses wind. And the advanced machinery just whoosh, blows the chaff off of the grain. It is nothing. It has no grounding. It has no way to even be attached to the seed that it grew from. And so the metaphor is really quite beautiful. Mm-hmm. I want to say welcome to Judy.
Yes, I'm so happy to be here. I'm sorry to be late, but I was at the doctor's, so I'm happy to be here.
That's all right. Do you have a
We're
note?
happy to have you.
Do you have a
Thank
note?
you.
You have a note from your doctor?
I have a note from my my mother and from the doctor.
Can you hold the note up to the screen, please? We can read it.
Oh, gosh.
Can I make a comment?
Yes, go ahead. Please do. Jump in.
How are you, everybody? Good to see you again.
Good to
First
see
of
you.
all. This was one of the things, this psalm was something that a great aunt demanded that I memorize. And no surprise, she also did the 23rd Psalm,
Yeah.
which we all know, right? But I always wondered why she did this one. I memorized it,
Yeah.
but I didn't understand the imagery at all. So this helps me, as I'm probably the age that she was when she demanded that I do this.
Yeah, and I can see
She was
why.
always old to me, you know.
Yeah, I mean, and we used to sing in the Pentecostal church. We used to sing a song about the tree planted by the water. I shall not be moved.
Yes, I know that
Yep,
song.
I shall not be moved. You know.
Yeah.
And
I always thought that was a slave song.
no, well, it may have been.
A protest song.
You know, and I think it.
And I think it was co-opted by the protest movement.
And why not?
Okay.
Why not? Because the imagery of it is exactly what the protest movements were about, which is to say, we have a grounding that you don't know anything about. You know, we do not, our lives do not depend upon the slave master. They do not depend upon your approval. Our lives and our future depends upon God and our relationship to God. So we have roots that go into the ground and hold us. We will not be moved. Although, I want to say that honestly, a true confession is I like to sing it in church as a song of defiance to my parents. You know? It just, I don't know, it is a great, stirred a great imagination for me. My parents were in the room and I would stand and I would sing, I shall not be moved. I mean, it worked. It just worked for me. So,
How old were you then?
8 years old, 9 years old, 10 years old.
Okay.
And I was loving the fact that right in the face of my parents, I could sing this song of defiance, and they knew nothing about what was going on inside of me at that time. Now, later on, it has come back to me in my life, even in the Presbyterian Church, and I sing it now, of course, as a great reassurance that life looks a certain way sometimes. And maybe this is why your grandmother felt like it was important for you to know it. That sometimes it can look, like you're going to get washed away or that you'll be blown away. But when your roots are in the knowledge and the love of God, you will not be buffeted about. You will be strong. The Apostle Paul says that the gift of meditating on the law of God and the love of God is that you get knocked down, you can get back up, you get you get beat up, you still stand up, and even if they kill you, you hold on to the promise of the resurrection. You will not be moved from the confidence of the love of God and the grace of God in your life. And that's a gift, and it is not offered in the other ways of living, the ways of, perverting the law for your own gain, of seeking, testifying unjustly against your neighbors, that people that you don't like, all the things that in the living of the rest of the Old Testament were defined as violations of the law of God, bearing false testimony against people, lying about people, especially for financial gain, and hoarding your possessions, especially in the face of someone who needs something. These were seen to be a violation of the law of God because it violates the very core of how life operates the way God has established it. God gives. God is generous. God shares. The rain falls on the just and on the unjust. God produces and shares the bounty of life with all of us. And then when some of us are able to receive it, the law of God calls upon us to then use what has been given to us to be a means of blessing to those that are hungry, that are naked, those that are struggling, those that are, pushed out and pushed down. That's the law of God. And I always thought, as a child, even as a young adult, I never made that connection, that the law of God is not just talking about the list of 10 rules or the list of 10 strong suggestions in the 10 Commandments. That's not what the law of God is about. And the whole time when Moses is trying to prepare the children for their entrance into the promised land, he keeps saying to them, do not forget about the law of God. Don't forget about the principle of life, because you're about to receive bounty upon bounty from the hand of God. And that is to prepare you then to be a giver and a blessing maker in the living of this life. And if you do that, you'll be like a tree that will not be moved. You will have the strength to live out life, and you will have understood God's purpose in life. Now, I guess I'm a great lover of teachers who teach by summarizing and putting things together. I really like when teachers do that. I've loved professors that do that. And I have not often in my life felt like the Bible has been taught to me that way. I feel like sometimes that this, what I believe is the golden thread that runs throughout the Bible, both in the Hebrew Scriptures and in the New Testament, has often just been neglected. We don't get the golden thread, which is this commission first to Abram and Sarah, and it underlies all the rest of what is referred to as the law of God. It's the principle of life. How does life have meaning? This is how it has meaning. And the Psalms will rehearse that more than anybody else. Who else? What other comments or remembrances does this bring up for you?
That is the love of it. Do you really start to do it? No, do you really get some good?
Actually, I think this first psalm is a really good way to start into the whole book of Psalms, because it kind of is a synopsis of, the meaning of what you're going to read going forward. And it encapsulates the whole idea of what God's relationship to us is, and what our relationship is to God. And, if you understand the first one, you pretty much can understand what's to follow.
No, I agree. I really do agree. And some of it, I think, comes down to, like in verse 2, where it says, but in the Lord's Torah. What does that mean? What does the Torah mean to you? What is it in my view, that is, it's like the nugget. The Torah is the essence of it all. What is the essence of this life of faith? What does it ultimately come down to? And it's not always easy to grasp. So the first psalm says it's worth meditating on it. It's worth meditating. And I don't know what that brings to your mind. Do you meditate on the law of God? Do you have a way in which you meditate on it? Because I think that the view of both, as Debbie said, not just this first psalm, but all of the psalms are going to caution you. They're going to caution you that if you want to unlock the secret, the absolute, I don't know if it's an intentional secret, but it's not obvious. But if you want to unlock the secret of God and God's way and living in God's life, you're going to have to purposefully turn your heart and your mind to meditate on it day and night. At one point, the psalmist says, meditating on this, because otherwise you will get led off the trail. You will be deceived. You will buy into a false view, a false narrative of life. You'll be. It reminds me of Pilgrim's Progress. How many times in Pilgrim's journey he hears the sirens of other ways of thinking about life and is led off and loses his way on the trail and then finds his way back. And it is in this meditating on the law of God. And I don't know if you have a way to do that. I have to say, when I was younger, I thought my one sister-in-law was kind of crazy. But you go into her house, and on her house she always has, it's usually a psalm or a piece of scripture or something that is the theme of her week. And she's got it in script, and it's attached to the top of her refrigerator. And,
There you go.
and it's like, and that is her thing for this week. And no matter what's going on in her kitchen or with her kids or whatever else that's happening out there, she comes back to the kitchen, which is the center of all of life, is the kitchen. And there on her refrigerator is, in essence, is the law of God for this week. This is the way we are to think about life this week. And it gives her, and I have to admit now, I can still think of some of those sayings that she would have on her refrigerator. And it guided her in her thoughts so she didn't get distracted and get led off the path. And I'm wondering, do you have in your own life, do you have things that help you like that? To keep your heart and your mind set on the things that are the way of God and not to get distracted?
I think when you say meditation, that I need to go this step further to contemplation.
Okay.
Which, I did something not too long ago for a meditation class, the difference between meditation and contemplation. And all right, I can think about through meditation, but then what do I do with it? And what I do with it is the action in the contemplation that brings me to action. And I think I need to make that step as well. I can think about something, but if I don't do something about it, it's not moving me forward.
I think that is so interesting, Barbara. Meditation leading to contemplation. I try to start days with a little book that I got at Al-Anon, and called Each Day in the Beginning. And it has a little bit of the three things that we're talking about. It has a spirituality, and it does have a contemplation, and it does have reflection, and it kind of sends you off with some kind of a spiritual message, of what gratitude, or kindness, or whatever it is. So each each day, there's a different label for your life. Yeah.
I think
But that's interesting that action is so much a part of our lives. And sometimes the idea of meditation is true. What it poses the question, what does that lead to, or what should it lead to? Or I don't know. But action seems to underlie a lot of what you're talking about. It's very interesting. Contemplation.
It reminds me of I don't know, for me it was groundbreaking, but the criticism of North American Christianity. It's a very strong criticism of North American Christianity that came out of South America and Central America in liberation theology. And the criticism was this, that European theology, brought over by Europe, was about a kind of thinking about it, always about thinking about it, and only thinking about it. And those aren't the words they use, but in the liberation theologians, what they said is that Christianity requires a cycle of action and reflection. That it requires action. And then they criticize some of the North American Christians in their spreading of, the manifest destiny was all about action, but they never reflected on the results of their actions. They had an idea, well, God's called us to this, but they never reflected on it. And then, of course, there are parts of Christians where they sit around and we pray and we reflect and we pray, oh God, would you please, help the poor and all the rest of that. But we never get up and go give $5 to anybody. We never allow our meditation or reflection or whatever to involve action. And I think that, I'm not sure if the psalmists were here today, they might argue that meditation, not so much like the Eastern meditation, which we need to do more of because it quiets us and helps us to hear ourselves, but that real meditation in this sense has built into it contemplation, reflection, and action. Mm-hmm. That without the action, and then without reflection on the action, you're stuck with good intentions are the road to, pave the way to hell. Actions, just for action's sake, are not necessarily helpful.
Right. I think of two things. I think of Gandhi. Now, he espouses nonviolence, which again, if you watched him, the behaviors were certainly reflective and meditative and nonviolent. And yet that led to action.
Yes, it did.
A whole change in government, yeah. So that's interesting. The other thing that I was thinking about was that when there is some kind of a tragedy and people say, we will keep you in our thoughts and prayers. I read someplace that what is more meaningful is two things. Presence and compassion, so that it isn't enough, to send, it's okay to send thoughts and prayers, but to be present, and which is far more comforting, and also to be compassionate.
Yeah.
So you are there present, you are there in your presence, but you are also compassionate, and that seems to be, an action that is more meaningful than thoughts and prayers, which is not to dismiss thoughts and prayers, but if you take it one step further. And I kind of like that. Yeah.
It's not an either or, it's a both.
Right, it's a both, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think, don't you think that the word compassion itself, for me, compassion stirs up images of actions. When you are compassionate with someone, you are motivated to actions.
Exactly.
I don't always know what those actions will be, but the compassion seems to have in itself more than just thinking, and even more than just praying. Although, the idea that we have today of what prayer is, with our eyes closed and our heads bowed and our bodies very still, I sometimes resist that as a full definition of what it means to pray. Because I think when you're praying for somebody, it also ought to include actions. You know, it has to include something of engaging you in the thing that you want to participate in. And I like all these words, but the word here in the psalm is to meditate on the law of God. And I don't know, sometimes maybe that's all you can do. You know, is just you get so confused in life, you just have to take out the book of Psalms and read and be comforted and meditate on the fact that, you know, God loves you and loves your neighbors and cares about you regardless of how life is unfolding for you right now.
Well, and the word that you used, engage, also suggests action. So that if you're present and you are engaged, just to what you were talking about, you know, what do you do next? Maybe you take that person, because you are there and you are engaged, and maybe you take them for a walk, or maybe you get them a cup of tea, or maybe, you know, so that, you know, action flows from, you know, just what you're talking about. Yeah, all of those words, you know, all of that thinking. Yeah.
An illustration comes to my mind is the Jersey City Church, or is it's the United Church in Patterson. Which one of the churches is doing the sandwich and the prayer on the sidewalk? That's you guys, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I see the pictures of that on Facebook, and I brought to tears. I'm literally brought to tears because I am so joyful that the church's listening to God has motivated people to get up and out of the pews. And instead of just saying, okay, we're praying for the homeless people that are on the outside or in the streets, the people are actually out on the street and giving sandwiches and then offering and saying, could I pray for you? Can I stand with you? Here I am. I'm out here in the world in which you're living in. And to me, that's everything that is joyful to me about being a Christian in the world today. That movement, that understanding, that growth for us is the best thing that's happened. I really celebrate that fact that we know that all the words spoken and all the hymns sung inside the cathedrals of our churches do not amount to one thing unless somehow we are moving out and interpreting what we're singing about and praying about and talking about into the very concreteness of people's lives. I just think that's a great movement of the Spirit. So, by the way, thank you all for doing that.
You know, that this first psalm implies that. It says meditate on the law of God, but the implication is then live it out.
Yes.
Be like the tree by the water, not the chaff that gets blown away. If you're living your life by what you're meditating, then you're being the tree with the strong roots and not the chaff that's blown away. And I'm reminded, this psalm reminds me of the first chapter in the Quran that we read when we pray. At least 17 times a day we recite that, bare minimum 17 times a day. And it's short, but it says much the same thing. It says, keep us on the sirat al-mustaqim, the straight path. Lead us to those who have your grace, not those who have gone astray, which I think this psalm is saying too.
Right.
And the reason that we have to recite it so many times is it's really in your brain. But that's just one day that you're reciting that 17 times. Think of how many other times, and every day. And after a while, if you don't understand what that means, then you can discard the rest of the book because you're not going to get it. And I think that's what this psalm is doing too. It's reinforcing the idea that you should know, you should meditate, you should know what God wants of you, what God expects of you, and then do it.
Yeah.
Go out and do it.
Live it out.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, and we can get really minute in we're coming into Ramadan tomorrow night, which I'm sorry, this will probably be my last Tuesday night, because they do a lot of classes where you're meditating on one verse at a time. Sometimes takes, a whole class just to go through one verse and discover what it might mean in your life. And they're really good at that at the masjid, really, but you need the meditation part. You need the time to sit down and think what you're doing before you go out and do something.
Yeah.
It has to be deliberate. You have to have that deliberation. Otherwise, you can be on the wrong path.
Yeah, and I think it's the nature. I just think it is the very way life is. Like, why is it that as human beings we have to meditate day and night? Why do we have to constantly come back to and be reminded again of what it is that what's the star we pursue? And the reason is because it is the nature of life itself. Mm-hmm. Life itself will lead you away from this.
It's a big distraction.
It is a huge distraction. And I'm sorry, I always look for opportunities to go back to my my teachings about the Garden of Eden. The snake is representative of all of this in life, of everything that comes along in life. The temptations towards riches, the temptations towards despair, all of it. The serpent represents everything in life that is tempting to you. Tempting to have you lose your way in what was a more simple kind of relationship. The foundational relationship of God to Eve and Adam was, trust me. Trust me. Trust me. Look around you and see bounty and trust me. But that trust they found, and we find it extremely difficult in the world in which we live to stay on, the references to the narrow path, to keep walking on the path that is what we really believe. It's, oh God, it's what I believe. Help my unbelief. Help my wanderings off of this path. And how do I trust you in times of trial? This is going to come up over and over again in the Psalms. How do I trust you in times of trial, O God? And the trials of life are profound. They're huge. When I was in seminary, I forget his name, Keith Miller, I forget. He wrote several books to edify the Christian community, and someone was interviewing him in his older age, and they said, what are your books about, really? He said, oh, well, it's quite simple. He said, every book I've written tries to say the same thing. Life is hard. Life is extremely hard. An acknowledgement of the hardship of life also then helps us to point us toward the simplicity of the depth of faith and the simplicity of what it means to come back over and over again to the love of God and the compassion of God and the gifts of God in life. Because, I could talk now until 1 o'clock in the morning naming the things that are the winds that blow against us, like the trees along the water, the raging waters that come seeking to wash the tree away, to uproot it, disease and hunger and disappointment and heartache and failed expectations. Oh my goodness, how many are there? How many are the challenges that come in this life? They are huge. They're huge. And yet, one of the favorite Psalms, and I think an image that's very hard to get our minds around, in the 23rd Psalm, the psalmist says that God sets a table of food in front of us in the presence of the enemies that are about to destroy us. Mm-hmm. And what is this special kind of meditation? You know, what is the, I won't say it too loud, but I think about this all the time. While we're having our Bible study here in a room just down the hallway, there's a group of men that have been meeting for years in this building. And basically, it's a recovery group. And what are they doing in that? They are meditating on the simple rules of the AA group, and they are trying to keep it simple. They're trying to be reminded that trust in God, faith in God is the way through life's difficulties, and to stay on the beaten path. They get together and they just remind each other of that all the time. And I had a good friend who was in AA for years, and he used to say, you know, he had a hard time connecting to the Christian church. He loved his AA community, and he said the problem he had was that in the Christian church, people, you know, they have a feeling that, you know, well, they have an idea of they really like to be a good Christian. He said in his life, his attendance and his attention to the steps, the 12-step program, was that he knew his life was at stake every single day. His life was on the line. And so he was sometimes annoyed by the casualness of, you know, the Sunday morning crowd that comes and sits in church and falls asleep or doesn't, you know, and I would just remind him that he should not be so judgmental. that may be him slipping a little bit off his own path, and then he would graciously accept that. But you know, he would say, why do I do AA? Why do I come to the meetings? Because my life is at stake. Mm-hmm. And I can die. I have come close to dying. And the truth is, for all of us in our lives, we may not always use such language, but we know that when we get outside this way of looking at life and understanding life, our life is at stake. We may not physically die, but we know what it means to die, and to die to meaning and to purpose. And then what's the cure? The cure is the action that reignites the faith is an action of generosity or of compassion, of giving. Mm-hmm. It's to get yourself back out there in the world. In the 12-step movement, is come and make a cup of coffee for somebody. Do something for someone else. And it begins to return us to the law, the core of the law, which is to live in gratitude and compassion because God has been gracious and compassionate toward me.
Amen.
So action is connected to purpose.
Yes, absolutely. Because when you lose purpose, if you lose a sense of meaning and purpose, the right action can reconnect you to it. It can absolutely reconnect you to a deeper and more meaningful purpose of life. And we used to find this with the mission trips that we would take, both to Appalachia in the south and up in the north. You know, we took teenagers, many of whom were living their lives, breathing in and out and eating, and they had no sense of any purpose or anything in their lives. They would come on these mission trips because their parents made them come, and we would take them for 10 days. We would put hammers and nails. We would give them instruction, and they would get involved in helping, you know, an old widow who lived on the edge of the creek, who the creek flooded her house every single day, and she had no inside plumbing, and they would get involved in it, and it was horrible, and a lot of it was dirty and mucky, and all of a sudden, the actions of caring and compassion for someone else who really had need ignited a fire of faith in them. And they came back then to the evening sessions, and when they shared, you'd have thought, I mean, these young people had profound insights about what it meant then to be a believer in God, to trust in God. And interestingly enough, they were amazed that the fuel that fed their awakening faith came from people who seemed to have nothing. You know what I mean? It's like this strange thing that happens in life. That, you know, and they at the end of 10 days of work and exhaustion and reflection and prayer and singing songs of faith, they would say, the surprise of the 10 days, I would ask, so what was the biggest surprise of this 10 days of your life that you have taken and given in mission? And they would always say, the surprise is, it's not what I gave, it's what I received. It's what came to me. And they would weep about it. And then, of course, you know, I think about all those groups of young people and sometimes the adults who came along as chaperones, you know, they were more moved than they ever imagined they would be. And then we return to our normal lives, and somehow all that seems to fade away in the challenge of life itself. Because the patterns of our lives do not bring that way of relating to each other. It does not. You have to go out and seek it.
Yeah, but you can seek it. There are ways to do it.
Yes, you can.
But it's very easy to sit back and say, okay, I did my thing. Now I have to go back and do life. But that is life.
But how do you reignite that period from action and belief and compassion to, okay, you know, that was then and that's what we did, but now we're back to our normal way of living. What do you do, you know, from point A to to get to point B again? You know, what's the action, or how do you ignite that transition so that it becomes a part of your life? Well, so it doesn't just become ho-hum. Yeah.
I mean, maybe some of you have answers to that as well. My own feeling is, and I know this sounds a little bit like Pollyanna or Walt Disney, but I believe that if you have your eyes open and your prayer is, Lord, show me that circumstance right now. Show me a circumstance, an event. Introduce me to a person today who is, and we would say this on the return from these mission trips, to say, these people aren't living in some nirvana somewhere. This is life, and life is all around you. It is all around you. And the opportunities to be in ministry, to be giving, to be sharing in compassion with others. Life moves at such a fast pace, we don't see it. But I am convinced that it is there. It's, you know, and again, Debbie, I'm sorry to quote so poorly from the Muslim tradition, but I know that part of the whole training of the Muslim tradition is to look for these opportunities.
Absolutely. They're all around. That's all the signs of God in your life. And one of the things that we are taught as Muslims, even if you're not doing what other people think are wonderful, great, and grandiose things, even a smile to another human being is a blessing to them.
Yeah.
And you can certainly do that. You can find time to do that every day of your life. Instead, you know, but because we're human beings and we're forgetful, even though we repeat these psalms and prayers over and over again, we forget where we're supposed to be headed. Right. You get out in the car and somebody cuts you off, and right away, you know, and it's just the opposite of what, you know, the temptation is there to be nasty to other people when they're nasty to you, to want more stuff in your life because that takes the place of trust in God, trust in, you know, impermanent things, and we just have to constantly remind ourselves of that. It's so easy to be nasty. It's sometimes very hard to be nice. And just that alone, you know. And of course, do the big things when you can. If you're able, do the big things, but do the small things too. How many times are you snappy with your family? It begins right with your family, you know. Sometimes we're the worst to our own families than we are to other people. So yeah, it's a constant struggle to remind ourselves to meditate on how we should behave with other people.
I agree with Debbie. I think, we have to be intentional about our faith walk. And so by being intentional, we have to stay in the Word. We have to stay prayed up. We have to spend time with other Christians or other people who are like-minded. But I just wanted to share, when we do the sandwich and a prayer, I leave there always feeling like I got more than any of them.
That's it.
I always feel so warm and so blessed, because the people that come, there was a gentleman that just came Saturday, and we met him, I guess, a couple of months ago, and he came to thank us. He says, I have a place to live. He said, the last time I was here, I was homeless. He says, I have a place now. He says, and I'm going to do everything I can possibly do to keep it. I'm not going to make mistakes like I did before and end up there. And that was such a blessing, hearing him and hearing his story. And we didn't direct him to any place. But my belief is that God opened that door for him.
Yeah, and I believe, Cheryl, that we all of us, we have trouble with integrity of using God language because it's not real. But when you get into circumstances of need, and circumstances either when the need is yourself, it is you, or that someone needs something from you, and you respond in grace and love and compassion, that's when all of our God language gets real. That's when it gets real, because it finds a context of real engagement and making a real difference in life. And I think, Debbie, you ruined it all by mentioning whether we're going to do these things to our families, because that's where it really gets real. It's easier.
And
Go ahead.
and I was thinking about what Debbie said. If you're driving your car and somebody crashes into you, and then you have all these epithets and that you want to use, how do you stop yourself at that moment and redirect your thinking or your passion or your compassion? What happens? A butterfly flies on your shoulder and reminding you, what is it? What's the moment? And how do you bring back that moment to transform the nastiness to kindness?
So I think Cheryl, whether she knew it or not, said something that I know is a big part of the Black church, and that phrase of being prayed up. You got to be, if you're prayed up, that's the whole thing. You got to store up in prayer. So when you get to those challenging moments, that somehow you have a preparation. It's not just responding to or asking after the fact, but trying to become prepared, to say, Lord, I know someone's going to come along and piss me off today. I just know it. And
is that prayed up or prepared up? Both.
So hello, everyone there. You don't know me. I'm Cheryl's husband. My name's Kevin.
Hi.
And I'm listening. How are you doing?
Good.
And so I'm listening to what you're saying, and that's exactly what you have to do. You have to remain prayed up at all times. So when you said prepared, you're preparing by constantly reciting different scriptures in your mind, in your head, constantly, because there's going to be a time when somebody's going to do something that's going to aggravate you, and in the midst of that aggravation, you really have to pray. You really have to use your scriptures, that your own personal ones that you keep, and that's what stops you from actually doing, at least in my case, that's what stops me from actually doing those, okay? Like one of them, I have tons of them, but the one I'll do most times is I'll say I'm a child of the Most High God, born in His image. His royal blood flows through my veins. And so I'll say that this is not the way that God would have me act. And so I won't. I'll change and go on from that. So, I hope that's helpful. But,
No, it's very.
Thank you.
I think it's very helpful, and I think that, we do two things. I think and I say we, I mean me. In the Presbyterian Church of PCUSA, we take this whole thing of the life and faith very casually. We take it very casually, and because we take it casually, we have surrounded us. We come to church. We have the beauty and the power of hymns that can stir and awaken faith like nothing else. But we take them casually. We put in an hour or an hour and a half, and we think, okay, we're good. But we forget about how challenging life really is. And I say this to my kids. I used to say it to them when they would listen to me. They moved away, so they don't have to hear me anymore. My parents, when I was young, my parents were ones that were very wary about the threat of television. They really, not just the X-rays they thought was coming out of the television, but they thought that television was going to be damaging to the way of faith. And I would say that it's proven itself to be true, because the commercials are an assault. Like every commercial you hear and every philosophy that is bombarded into your life today is an assault to your sense of being able to survive in the way of God. Because the philosophy, the airwaves philosophy of the world we live in is get more, get more, get more, get more, and be happy because you got more.
Yeah.
And yet, this tree that is planted by the water is a tree that is nurtured by everything that is not offered in the promises of life that come on the airwaves today. And I said it first, I would say it to my children, but I'm aware it's an assault every day on me. It attaches an idea of how to be happy. What does it mean to be happy? What has to happen in your life before you can be happy? And you see these visual images of people, and at parties and great big luxury resorts and all the things that are paraded in front of our eyes every day. And what do we do to counterbalance that? What do I do? Nothing, really. I have nothing to match the power of the voice of those ideas and philosophies that come at me every day. And what I am aware of is that it wears away my sense of meaning and happiness in life. It does.
Yep.
It's like a hole in the bottom of the boat. And it doesn't matter, how much you have. It's not about how much, it's more. It's how much is enough, right? Just a little bit more. And my head, I know this in my head. But the assault that comes to our lives just wipes us away. We're not like trees planted by the water. I'm not like a tree planted by the water. I'm like a tree, planted by the water, and here comes the flood water, and I'm in the waves. I'm going I'm on my way down the stream. And I feel like this, that image of the chaff. The wind of life doesn't have to blow too hard to knock me off. It doesn't. And that's just my own confession to you. And clamoring my way back, praying my way back. I wish, to Cheryl's idea, I wish in some ways that the disciplines of my life had brought me to be prepared in advance of the challenges, rather than trying to always scramble my way back after I've lost my way and I find myself feeling like a poor person. Can you imagine, in the world in which I live, that I sometimes wake up and believe that I am a poor person? It's insane.
I can believe it. But isn't that part of life, is to be always life tries to push you off that straight path. It tries its very best to do that. And even when you do stray, the coming back is what's important.
Yes.
And it teaches you something new each time. We're not meant to be perfect. We're not going to be perfect. I think, when you're tempted by things, there's a concept in Islam called taqwa. That's a primary concept is God consciousness. To always remind yourself that you are standing before God at every moment. How will you explain what you're doing? And we know we're going to do the wrong thing a lot of the time. But if we have that idea that, I am standing in front of God. I'm sorry for what I did. What can I learn from it this day to do better the next?
Right.
That's what it means to be human, is we're always striving to do better. So we swear at the guy who cuts us off,
Yes.
and then tomorrow we'll try and do better.
Right.
We'll try not to slam into the back of his car, because, it's just the way, it's not good for us. It's not good for the other person. And hopefully somewhere along the line, we start to learn these lessons. That's what life's all about. It's a learning adventure. Like you say a lot, Lou, we're on an adventure.
Right. It is a
Not
journey.
always an easy path.
Right.
It's difficult
and I
every
thank
day.
you. I thank you for that reminder that way, because I do get to thinking sometimes I have a perfectionist tendency in me, and I think, if I wake up and I'm feeling poor and I'm ashamed of myself and all that, but I forget, to Kevin's point of view, many of the scriptures that I love most that I keep in my inventory aren't just the ones that pray me up to be strong to resist the temptations, but in my scripture like resources, there's a lot of scriptures about how forgiving God is. That I need to be reminded, to the image that Kevin quoted when he said, I'm reminding myself that, I'm a child of the living God, a prince of the king of the world. That can be very strong as a defense, but then life still presents challenges. The waves come, they billow, and they roll over us, and we wake up and we find ourselves off the trail, and when we do, we are then encouraged with every part to then fall into the nature of who God really is. God is a loving and compassionate God. And I would argue that ever since the feet of Jesus walked on this earth, that God understands more than we ever will give God credit for. God understands how hard it is and why we fail. And so Jesus' words from the cross, from the cross. You talk about human failure, that humanity crucified the Son of Love, crucified the King of Grace. And the words that come from the cross are, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. To me, that is the saving, literally, the saving grace of the God who is revealed, and that this is the nature of God. It's our judgmentalism that then says, if we don't stay on the straight and narrow and the perfect and the straight, then we've fallen off and then we're hopeless, and we might as well just, as Luther said, if you're going to sin, sin boldly. I like that. I like that Luther said that. What I always forget is what his argument was. If you're going to sin, sin boldly, and then you will be able to boldly declare the grace of God, who forgives you for that sin. So,
the word awareness pops into my mind, and I wonder, how do you create and maintain the awareness to absorb all of this? To change behavior in the moment. Where does how do you? You have to be aware. To do any of these things, and it seems that underlies everything that we're talking about, because first you're aware and then you can make changes, and I don't know, it's difficult.
I think, Judy, I think that the awareness, and I don't know how it is for other people, but I think The awareness for me is nurtured and maintained in community. It's not something that you can do by yourself. And it isn't even something that always happens because you're with other people. My own belief is that the awareness of this, the full breadth and depth of living the Christian faith requires that you have a community of people who also will be honest with you about their own journey. Because what do we do here? I mean, what is this? This is a community, this Bible study. And yes, we talk about, we open the Bible to see what God is like, and then we learn what human beings are like. But whether we name it or not, part of what we're doing in this gathering is we are encouraging each other. Mm-hmm. We are awakening each other to things that we might not otherwise see. And I think that is the component that makes it all work. If you, I had one psychiatrist who was giving us instructions about preaching and saying that you can preach about forgiveness until you are blue in the face. But if a person in your congregation has never actually been forgiven, they will never know what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. And if they have never actually forgiven someone else or talked with someone else about what the challenge of forgiveness really is, it will never be real in their lives. And so God can be full of grace and mercy and all the rest of it, but unless we have found a community where we can say the truth, stop pretending with each other. Admit life is hard. Admit that we fail. Admit that we disappoint ourselves. And in so naming that, we encourage each other. I try to remember that in terms of my own role as a pastor. And people will often say to me that what they appreciate is that I try not to put on a holier-than-thou image. I want you to know that I struggle not just like you, but I am a human being. I am. I struggle. And I can, if I share that, what I find that happens is that people who come to church or come to Bible study, they feel it's refreshing. And there's room for them, right? There's room for others. Because there's no point in us pretending. There is no point in us pretending. We all go through this challenge this way. And so to your question, Judy, which is how do we keep the awareness? You keep people near you who will also name the truth about the difficulty in their own life. And faith is nurtured in community.
That's good.
Amen.
When Jesus wanted to convey a message, he would often, recite a parable or something. But I'm just struck by some of the things that Jesus did to absolutely exemplify the message he was trying to impart. When he washed the feet of the disciples,
yes,
he was being a servant to them. And that is what he was trying to teach them, to be a servant to others.
Yeah, to each other.
And then in doing that, you're a servant of God.
Yeah.
And what better way to exemplify that than to actually do it? Get down on your knees and do the gritty stuff of life. And Jesus wasn't above that. He was their teacher, but in a very profound way. And
I would say you seek out people in this life who will be honest with you about their own journey. And, again, I have this huge model in my life of what the meaning of 12-step groups are. One of the powerful parts of the 12-step recovery groups is, in the face of terrible physical addiction, the remedy and the power against these addictions is honesty and the willingness to share their stories with each other. It's a miracle, and it's not a complicated faith. They point to a very simple faith of trust in God and reminding each other they fail. Okay, tell your story. Let's talk. Let's encourage each other, and let's be together. And I think in some ways that was the early model of the church. The church today struggles to create that kind of community because there's a variety of reasons for why people seek out the gathering of the church. But I long for the kinds of conversations that we have here. Those mission trips I talked about were powerful for me because people would get really tired and they would get really exhausted and then they get really honest, you know. Mm-hmm. And in that there's room. There's room for me then. There's room for me. I don't have to worry that I have to keep up a pretense. And to me, I'm glad we got to where we did tonight because I think that's part of what the Psalms will invite from us. They will invite out of us an honesty, a statement of our own lives. And you'll hear the psalmist do it, and then we can share that with each other, and we can encourage each other in this life of faith. Okay, my friends, we've come to the end of our time. And wow, I started out tonight until about 5 after 7. There wasn't a single person here. And then out of the woodwork you came. And I'm so glad you did. I so much enjoy the conversations that we have together. And I hope that they are inspiring and encouraging to you in your life of faith as well. So I'll say good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Good night.
Okay.
Thank
I
you.
would like to have some of the verses that Kevin
Yes.
says.
Yes.
Um,
Cheryl, did you hear that?
Yes.
Okay, so you tell Kevin he has a homework assignment for us.
For next week.
Okay, good. All right.
Thank you.
All right, good night, everybody.
You're welcome.
Good night, all. Take care.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.